And the last role that we're going to highlight today, guess what, man? You are made to be a leader. Now, this is where there's so many, man, we could go into a large, like,
we've done other breakdowns
Right.
of leadership, and we did a 3-part series on
we did.
leadership.
But like we could go into
We're
a large,
talking about it in the context of this is a role of a man.
right. And we could do a large commentary on how society has, I think society's just kind of usurped this and they've made it because the default thought process for leadership is that the leader's better and that it's a place of supremacy. And
It's the leaders kind of like the hero role.
Right.
People are like, oh yeah, I want to be that.
yeah, and
So
so
the guy in charge.
right. And so if you're saying like, oh, hey, men, you're called to be leaders, a lot of people will take offense at that because they'll be saying, oh, well, so they're supposed to be the leader because they're better. Like they get to call the shots and do what they want. No, that is not what we're saying. Leadership is a function of order, not supremacy, right? Look at Jesus. You want to talk about biblical leadership? Man, I'll tell you, it's a lot easier to be the person being lifted up than it is the one to be doing all the lifting, right? Because you're, as a follower of Christ, you're called to serve. You're called to do what's required and to literally enable and lift other people up. You're called to develop them. You're doing the hard work. I mean, we talk about it all the time about, men, you're called to serve your wife as Christ loved the church. Well, think what Christ did for the church. This is like that kind of leadership. That's not something that you're going to put up for on billboards where everyone's going to be like, I want that. That's what we're called to do. And so let's not get this twisted. God made it that way very clearly, right? I mean, we could go through scripture after scripture where it talks about, from a very simple standpoint, God made man to start with. He made man and he gave him the commission and he told him what he was here to do. So men, you are called to be the leader, and we're going to get into specific applications of that. But there's a lot in that first thing I said.
The question of leadership is what's needed here.
Yeah, very good.
And I would say the follow-on question of that is what's required of me.
Correct. Yeah.
And something Pastor Keith has said that I really, really love is, I think this is so sharp, and he's seen this in his son Josh, who's, I've grown up with, my best friend, and then, Pastor Keith and Josh, if you know them, they're very different. Mm-hmm. And something that Pastor Keith says I think is so fantastic is that leadership transcends personality. Mm-hmm. And Josh is one of the best examples that I've ever seen.
Right.
Right. You know the Josh that we all know and love today. I know a Josh that's very different.
Right.
Right. And I love who Josh is today, and I loved him when he was something different, but man, has he changed.
Yeah.
Man, has he changed. And leadership transcends personality. What that means is when you care more about the mission, when you care about others more, when, like the Great Commandment says, love God and love your neighbor as yourself. When you love other people well, instead of saying like, man, what can I get out of this? You treat them like, hey, man, what can I do for them?
Right.
The way that we were talking recently about marriage, right? And God took a piece out of man and made woman. Right? He took a piece of man's body to make woman. It's as if woman is a part of his own body.
Right.
Right? And you would not abuse your own body. You would do things well for your own body. And when you love other people that way, that's what love your neighbor as yourself is. Mm-hmm. It's the same relationship as a man and a woman. Right? And when you're selfish, right, you do things that you end up hurting your body, or you end up hurting your wife, you end up hurting the other people around you. But a leader says what's needed here. A leader says what's required of me. Mm-hmm. A leader is like a good, healthy thought life ahead for a body that says, what does the body need?
Correct. Yeah.
Let me give that to the body.
Right.
A selfish brain says, what would make me feel good? Mm-hmm. I don't care what it does to the body. It's going to make me feel good.
Right.
Right. And that's not a leadership thought, but a leadership thought transcends feelings, and it says what's needed. What does the body need? That's what I'll provide.
Right. And part of that inherent in what you're saying is that you have to be the one that upholds standards. Mm-hmm. And this is something that I know not everybody, I mean, most of the people that listen to our podcast will never come to Mighty Men. Although more and more people are making pilgrimages.
Make a trip. We'd love to meet you.
We'd love to meet people that come to Mighty Men. Obviously the prerequisite is you're a man. So to
ladies, see you on Sunday.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We'll meet you on Sunday. But one of the things I love about that is, to me, that's where we get in our everyday, every week lives. We get to experience standards because you got to experience standards in such a high role in the Navy SEALs that I don't think people know what standards really are based on the way you experience them.
Really, their view of standards is the standard is more important than you are.
Yeah,
the standard protects the whole body. You're just a piece of the body. Right. And so it's a leader who's controlling that standard. It says, we're going to put these standards in place that will protect the body.
Right. Exactly. And so as the leader, you're the one who does that. Well, why do you do that? You just said it, because you have to protect. Because if you start letting the standards fall, you're letting any old thing in. I mean, in your case, it was, well, if we start letting people through because we like them, you're going to get on the battlefield and then that guy's not prepared and he runs away and, oh, now everybody got killed because we let a guy in that we like.
But he was a cool bro.
Yeah, but he was great on the weekends. Okay. Like, and we all laugh at that because that's ridiculous. But in your family and as the leader of yourself, like, what are the things that you have to have a non-negotiable? Like we said, the standards are clear, they're intentional, and they're black and white, right? So, or with purpose, I should say, or they don't change. Getting them wrong. They're black and white, they're intentional, and they never change. Like you said, there's no reason
to break them,
right? To break a standard. So, as one who upholds standards for you in your life, is it in your family? With your kids, what are the things that there's never a reason why you should break those things? And also another responsibility inherent in what you said, because you're talking about it from the brain and the body, which is a great example. What's in your brain? What's up in your head? Your eyes. You're the one that's casting a vision, that's looking out ahead, going, hey, here's what's possible. Here's the dangers. Here's the things that we need to be thinking about. So often we can get head down and butt up. I share it all the time. I can link to it in the show notes. Like, I think one of the greatest things you can do is to put a regular reflection time into your calendar. What I said I would share in the show notes, I do this once a month. I ask myself 8 vision alignment questions. And it's basically just I look back on 30 days to learn my lessons. I look 30 days ahead so I can apply those lessons and make sure that I'm being intentional about how I live the next 30. And I also have some bigger picture things that things that I check on. And you don't have to use my 8 questions. You don't have to do anything like that. But having regular time to stop, reflect, plan, look ahead, take stock of what you need to do, that is a function of leadership.
Like you learned on Legacy Navigators.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You don't just like pick a direction and say, well, let's just go. I'm going to keep walking that way. I'll walk from one point directly to the next point.
No problem.
No, you walk to milestones and then you stop and you say, okay, I had planned to be here. Let me orient myself. Is here actually where the map says, right?
Yeah.
Am I where I think I am? And you
Right.
got to have those checkpoints. But default mindset on leadership, right? You mentioned it already. Default mindset on leadership is like, hey, how big of a position do I got?
Right.
How many people am I leading? How much money am I going to get? What are the benefits for me? That's like wrong mindset of leadership. The mindset of leadership we just described, what we're talking about, is the position of a servant, right? A servant is the one who says, what's needed? What can I do for you?
Right.
Right? Sounds really similar to what's needed here.
Yeah.
Right? A servant says, hey, what can I do for you? And leadership really is a position of serving the people around you. And you'll get to serve in a great way when you continue to grow as a servant leader. The first thing you got to, again, we're dropping some of Pastor Keith's top ones, at least in my opinion, top ones. One of my favorite Pastor Keith quotes is the best gift that you can give somebody is a healthy you, right? And so when you lead yourself well, you'll become really healthy.
Yeah.
And that will enable you to lead others well. And you'll continue to grow in leadership and grow in your ability to serve others. And this kind of connects back to both weight bearing and seed sowing, right? When you're saying like, hey, I'll take on the weight of being a servant and I'll find the people that I can sow into, you begin to grow as a leader and you grow in your kingdom impact. Everyone should want to be a leader because that means that you're able to do more in the kingdom.
Right.
It's like you're a servant that was so good, other servants were assigned to you. This is who Daniel was. This is who Joseph was, right? And Daniel talks about the kingdom that, Daniel got ripped out of his home serving in another king. And it says, now the king put over all of his people these types of leaders, right? And then he put other leaders over those types of leaders.
Right.
And then he put these leaders over the leaders of leaders of leaders. And then he put Daniel over all of them.
Yeah.
Right. But Daniel still worked for the king.
Right.
Right. It wasn't his kingdom. But I said that to say leadership, the more you grow in your ability to serve others and your ability to bear weight and your ability to sow seed, you'll get to, if you have the right mindset in weight bearing, if you have the right mindset in seed sowing, you'll get to a place like, man, I'm really getting to lead and serve a lot of other people. And as long as you stay in the right mindset of leadership where it's like, hey, I get to do great things for the kingdom, I get to really bless other people, you'll continue to grow in leadership. As soon as you shift into a mindset of like, man, what can leadership do for me? That's the beginning of the end of your leadership.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's like what we said at the beginning. You have to understand that it's a process and also that you have to be submitted to God. And so, big thing, we talked about this, we talked about other parables. I mean, God talks about the parable of the talents, and the lesson there is stewardship. So when we're looking at this, in order to function as a leader in the way that God's designed you, you're going to have to grow in your understanding of stewardship, that it's not yours, right? That everything you have is you're going to have to give an answer for, and that you also need to understand what's in your hand. And this is something that I feel like we talk about this a lot, and especially coming out of Purpose. I will tell you, I think when you say what's in your hand, lots of people are going to be like, well, I got my money, right? Yeah, that's an obvious one. Okay, and you got some people you're clearly responsible for. If you're married and you have kids, okay, people will see that one. What I think people miss all the time is that they'll miss their time. Is one of the first ones I think people steward poorly, and they gloss over it. Their actual reputation. Like I think the way I like to think, if you want to know what's in your hand, imagine you had everything taken away from you, and you were either going to be on the streets or you were going to figure it out. What are all the things you would start doing? Suddenly, all the relationships you have, the reputation you built becomes very valuable.
Right.
And, you know what I mean? And like you'd have to start to use the skills that you have. Oh, you mean I'm a steward of those? Yes. You have knowledge that you've gained. You have reputation that you've gained. You have relationships and access that you've gained. Like these are all things that you need to steward well. Steward how? Well, in order to advance the kingdom of God, to glorify God in all that you do. Of course, your kids. Of course, your wife. Your health. Yeah, that's a big one as well that you can sometimes think it's okay. Those types of things. But like when you actually understand what's in your hand and you realize your responsibility as stewardship, you realize that you've got to start leading yourself better. You've got to take a mindset of being intentional every single day in what you're doing. And what happens is you start to build. If you do this well, you build consistency. And if you build consistency, that will breed respect. And when you breed respect, guess what? Your influence grows. And then your ability as a leader grows, because when people will follow somebody that they respect, right? And so all these things are tied into each other, but it starts with the stewardship thought process.
Yeah, you're talking about some of like, hey, this is what leadership looks like.
Correct.
That's we mentioned, like default leadership is, hey, man, what can I do for me? How many people? We already mentioned all the wrong. And you're talking about stewardship as one of like the main things of like, hey, this is what good leadership looks like.
Yeah.
Let me mention something else on what good leadership looks like. I learned from both bad leaders and good leaders in the military. And you can learn a lot from bad leaders. Pay attention, right?
Yeah.
They'll show you what not to do. But some of the best leaders I've ever worked for in my life, and I put my dad in this category because he exhibits this ability very well, is the quality of equanimity.
Yes, I couldn't agree more.
Equanimity is in the military, for us, it means you don't panic when you're getting shot at. The Webster's 1828 dictionary definition is evenness of mind.
Right.
That calm firmness of mind, which is not easily elated or overly depressed, right? That good things happen to you, bad things happen to you. You just keep on going, right? I'm going to continue to be me no matter what's going on. It is kind of a regardless mindset that you have. And equanimity is such a great quality of a leader, because here's what the opposite of leadership looks like. I know I'm the boss, but I had a bad night and someone else do the work today. I don't feel like having a good attitude. I don't feel like talking to these people. I don't feel like I know there's things that are needed of me, but I don't want to.
Right.
That's what a lack of equanimity looks like as a leader. And as a leader, it's kind of like there's a Murphy's Law of leadership that when the most is going to be required of you, it'll hit you at the time that you least feel like doing it.
Right.
You will get tested in your leadership. Oh, you think you want to be a leader? We'll see.
Yep.
Let me just throw this curveball at you. See how much of a leader you really are. And It takes equanimity to be able to deal with those things and not let them shake you up. And that's a choice that we get to make, but it's also fruit of the Holy Spirit, which is self-control.
Yeah, very
right?
good.
You have to have the belief that, the Holy Spirit can operate through me. And just like I had to do to myself recently when I was not having a very good attitude and I wouldn't let anything wrong come out of my mouth, but I certainly did not feel like having a very good attitude. And the ultimate solution to that for me is, I'm going to use some of my natural strengths of hey, I know how to control my thinking, but I'm when it's not working, I'm saying, God, I need you to help me right now. There's jacked up thoughts in my brain and I need you to help me with this because this isn't who I want to be. This is not who you made me to be.
Yeah.
Right. But we have to have self-control. You've got to exercise that in the physical. You've got to exercise that in the part that you control, and then lean on God in the part that you can't.
Yeah. And so understanding that you are the leader. I want to get into a few specific applications, G, but I want to give people this. I thought you gave such a great analogy. We talked about the head and body, but you said in that a leader's part is to help others play their part, right? And I just thought, like, in the thought process you've always given me is that the leader's asking, what does the room require,
Yeah.
right? That's what you're
What's
thinking.
needed here.
Right. When you walk in as the leader, that's what you're saying. And it sounds so simple, but really think about that. Because every example we've given, I mean, ultimately you're fighting selfishness, right?
A leader is not a hammer. A leader is a multi-tool.
Right. Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Right? Like you go into every room, it's like, a leader may love being a pair of pliers, but that's not what's needed in here. We need a pair of scissors. We need a screwdriver. What do I need to do so that you guys can do what you're supposed to do?
And you know where you'll get challenged on that? And this is every leadership role, whether it's with your wife or in a big room or whatever, is your communication.
Yeah.
It is one of the most, like, I don't think people think they need to develop the communication skill, but understanding how people process information. There's different types of learners. There's different ways that they actually take it in, and before they'll process and do something with it, it goes through various filters. Like you always say, sent is not received. We did a whole podcast on communication, but it's vital as a leader.
Well, people got to understand. This might be an unlock for some people. Okay. You can communicate events. You can communicate facts. You can communicate feelings. You can communicate ideas, right? And it's very simple to communicate a fact, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can put into a sentence a history fact and communicate that to you. There are some things that take a great deal to communicate, such as feelings. People write entire books to try and communicate a feeling, to try and communicate, hey, this is what that experience is. And so in your communication, right, this is the like, I'll simplify the lesson of communication. That sent does this is a logical rule of communication that I learned in the military. Sent doesn't mean received.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I said something to Nick doesn't mean Nick heard it. There's a difference between communication and broadcasting.
Right.
Broadcasting is I sent a message out over the airwaves. Communication is I talked to you and you talked back to me. And
Right.
good communication is you heard what I said and you repeated it back to me. Right? I can make comms with someone. This happens in the military. I might be on a secure frequency and I'm talking to HQ and HQ is talking back to me. There's massive interference. I can't understand anything they're saying, and they can't really understand anything that I'm saying. Like I hear like a word or two. I heard half of a call sign. So, you know what? All that happened there, we didn't really communicate anything, but they know I'm not dead.
Right.
That's it. Like
Right.
so like a connection has been established, but we didn't really have quality communication.
Right.
Real communication happens after. I say, HQ, this is, Trident 1. Trident 1 is on target. HQ, how do you hear me? Right? And HQ is going to say, Trident 1, I receive you. Understand, Trident 1 is on target. Over and out. Right? Done. Right? They know, like I told them where I'm at. They said, got it. We understand where you are. Communication has now happened. But a lot of people will, broadcast things. That doesn't mean that people heard you. Or they will think communication has occurred, but they were communicating something a lot more complicated than, hey, I'm on target.
Right.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
Right. But when you begin to communicate feelings, which is where a lot of people struggle, trying to communicate ideas, trying to communicate complex things, people think like, hey, man, I told you the facts. And
Right.
there's when you're trying to get everyone to work together, you can call plays. But if I'm trying to describe, like I can call plays to my team, like I'm talking about SEAL team, I can call plays to a SEAL team really quickly. If I'm trying to communicate to you like what I'm seeing on target right now, that's not a short sentence. It's probably easier for me to just send you a picture,
Right.
Which we would do. But I'm just saying people misunderstand the different types of things that they're communicating. And men are guilty of trying to communicate feelings like facts.
Right.
And that's where poor communication happens.
Yeah. And so, I mean, we were talking about what you must do in order to fulfill the function of leadership. And I didn't want to skip over that because communication is such a key one. When we talked about leading yourself, equanimity, consistency, the prudence to understand the part you play, right? Knowing that your part is there to help others play their part. And all this boils down to what I think is great leadership. And you've shared this quote so many times, G, so I'm basically stealing from you, who you were quoting Eisenhower, right? You want to share your Eisenhower quote on leadership?
Which Eisenhower quote? Because I quote Eisenhower a lot.
Well, it's leaders get people to do. Great leaders getting people to do what needs to be done. How it needs to be done.
Eisenhower says leadership is getting people to do what you want them to do when you want them to do it, and this is the linchpin of leadership. And they want to do it, right?
Yes.
So leadership is getting them to do what you want them to do when you want them to do it, and most people think leadership is those two things.
Right.
But the third thing is, and they want to do it.
Right. Because
And that's where John Maxwell says leadership is influence.
right. And that's what's required. Is there's so much to that as far as needing the warmth. I mean, if you've led people beyond just your family, you realize like there's so many different personality types. I'm thinking about things in my own life right now. I will say, like, my wife and I servantly direct our kids department now at church, and so we've got 350 people that we serve as leaders. And there's so many different personalities, and it's been one of the best things for me personally. It's been so good to have to, in a man's environment, it can be a little bit more harsh. We're working with women
Sure.
and kids, and like it's required a different level of compassion and empathy that I don't.
It's
naturally
exercise
speak.
your leadership.
It really
A
has.
reflection of your leadership is how much the people following you want
Right.
to do what you ask of them.
Yeah.
One of the greatest compliments my wife has ever given me is you make it easy to follow you.
Yeah.
What she's saying is like, you explain things in a way and you live in a way that I want to do the
Right.
things that you're saying.
Yeah.
That's what good leadership looks like. And
Yeah.
if your kids don't want to listen to you, if your wife doesn't want to listen to you, if whatever teams, people that you lead don't want to listen to you, you need to take a good long look at your leadership.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, how much different does the world look, G? Like, because this whole thing is just us talking about how God's made men and how we see the world. How much different does the world look to have men who are loving and serving and leading that way, in a way that other people want to follow them because they see the fruit in their life. They see the consistency of who they are being lived out in what they're doing.
We certainly need men that are like that. I didn't say when the people who are following you don't want to follow you, you beat them.
Right. Yeah.
I said
man.
you need to take a long look at your leadership.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to have people who don't want to follow, and those people will exit themselves. But if you consistently, as a leader, nobody wants to follow you, nobody wants to listen to you, it's not them, it's you.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that you said that would break you as a leader, that would break leadership, is that when you start seeing other people as there to help you, that's whenever you know you're on the path down.
Yeah, that's the end of leadership, because leadership is not for you.
Right.
The leadership thought is what's needed here, what's required of me.
Yeah.
And as soon as you start looking at leadership as what can leadership do for me,
Mm-hmm.
it's the beginning of the end of your leadership.
Yeah, so good. Now, this is where I think there's some overlap here. I want to wrap up a little bit because I want to give, we'll wrap up here, but I want to give a couple quick examples of this. I think, and I want to ask you a specific situation because I think you have a lot of wisdom on it. For the seed sower, we talked about how you have to see what's possible. And as a leader, you have to be able to cast vision. I think so much of where you can get off site and think things are there for you is if you don't have that clear vision. We talked about how powerful clarity is to kick you forward when we were talking about our growth cycle a few weeks ago. When you realize that your job is to help others play their part, let's look at your family, right? When you realize, hey, I have the chance here to build a great family. I have a chance to build a family that can go out and be a blessing to so many other people on the earth, whether it's that we can be an example of what a great family looks like, whether it's that my kids are then going to go reproduce with other people and we're going to bring those people into our family and they're going to create grandkids. And what could the generational impact be? When you start having that will be the times whenever, like we talked about with equanimity, the kids are kicking off. Your wife's had a rough day. She's not in a great mood, right? And if you in that moment just go like, man, I thought, this isn't the way I want it. Guess what? That's not the way anybody wants it to be, right? That's whenever,
sure.
if you've got the clear vision, this is what I'm talking about. If you've got the clear vision and you understand what's possible, this is when the leader comes in and what's needed. If your wife's having a rough day, what happened? Okay, well, right now she's behind on dinner. I'm just giving a hypothetical. She's behind on dinner. She's had a rough night. Great. Step in. Make it happen. We're going to order in. Hey, kids, let's do this. Like, these are the practical moments when, because you have a bigger vision of what you guys could be and what you're trying to build, you're going to step in. What does the room require? Very, very simple question.
Simon Sinek wrote a book called Leaders Eat Last.
Right.
And he talks about this, he goes way deep into it and talks about some other things, but he's talking about this concept, right? It is the servant leadership model.
Right.
Right? Like, you may be really hungry, but when your wife is really upset, maybe she's hungry too, if not literally, figuratively.
Right.
And you need to help her with her needs first.
Right. Yeah. Very good. Okay. So this was the last practical question because I've seen you do this in Mighty Men and I think it's amazing. Garrett will talk about how men have a responsibility to lead, and he'll say, men, put your hand up if your wife's smarter than you. And let's just be honest, guys. Some guys, you've married a woman that's smarter than you.
Yeah, I think the last time we did that, more than half of the room raised their hands. But the reason I ask guys to do this is because I want to help them realize what their role is.
Right.
There's a great Navy book. I don't remember the author's name, but it's the the guy whose story it is the author. He was a Navy captain. And there was this is in, it's like 1999 or 2000. The title of the book is Turn the Ship Around. Okay. And Turn the Ship Around, a captain, and this is going to be a summarization of his story. I don't remember like all the specific details, but it's a great story. Captain of this submarine unit gets fired right before deployment, right? Which is bad because you spend all of pre-deployment training to be able to deploy together.
Right.
It's not a good position to like get instilled right before deployment, but they had to fire this guy and they had to get somebody else in there. So they put this new captain in right before they deploy. And so he goes into deployment basically blind, doesn't know anybody, hasn't trained with them, is not prepared. And so what he's having to do all throughout his leadership is just ask questions and have good meetings with people and trust in them and help them make good decisions. He doesn't have the past experience with them or the knowledge with them to say, here's what you should do. He doesn't have it. He can't say, here's what you guys need to do. He just helps everyone else make really good decisions. Right. But he understands, you know what? It's all going to fall back on me, and I'm not going to operate in fear in that. I'm going to do my best to serve you and equip you and help you make good decisions. And it was obviously a glaring success and why he wrote a book about it.
Right.
And I say that to say, you don't have to be the guy with all the answers to be the leader.
Very good. Yeah. That's like a perfect analogy, isn't it? Because it's like you ask questions, you help evaluate the situation, and you just guide and to bring out the best.
It's a fantastic book called Turn the Ship Around.
Yeah,
I just don't remember the author's name.
I love that. So men, there you go. Like we said, the three roles that we're saying are weight bearer, seed sower, and leader. But just keep in mind that with all this, it all goes back to what we said very early on in this podcast, which is this single podcast for us, but what for you will be a couple episodes ago, is just that we are looking to see men that understand who God is. They know who God is. They know who they are. They know their alignment or their assignment, and they have a regardless faith. Like the world needs great men. We laid out at the beginning the problems that we're facing, and like regardless of what you think about where the country's at right now, or whether you feel optimistic or pessimistic, the world needs a man like you to step up and be who God's made him to be. We all have to do it together. It's not down to just somebody else or a government program or, this church in this location has a good thing. We need men to understand that you're here. You have work to do. You have an assignment. And until you humble yourself, get in submission to God and get yourself right, you will not fill that work. And there are other people that will pay the price. We see over and over and over again, if a man doesn't lead his family well, in so many cases, if he's not even there, what he's doing is he's creating a mess and he's handing it down to the next generation and saying, you figure it out. And then you know what happens is, unfortunately, a lot of those people have wounds and they don't figure it out and they pass it down. They pass down a bigger problem because now it's been compounded. And we can't have that cycle continue. We need men that are going to step up. And Garrett, you said it so well. You said great men solve problems they didn't cause, right? And that's what we need. We need men that are not only going to not be a problem, but are going to be a problem solver for others.
Just remember that you have a kingdom assignment. Remember that you have a purpose, and that purpose is not about you. And these roles that we talked about today, being a weight bearer, being a seed sower, being a leader, what those things are going to do for you is they're going to mature you into who God's called you to be. And the more you focus on yourself, the more you focus on the pain, the more you're going to go backwards, the harder it's going to be for you. You're going to feel stuck. But if you'll focus on who God is, if you'll know who he made you to be, if you'll decide to live with a level of faith where you say, it doesn't matter what happens, I'm going to choose to walk forward. I'm going to choose to believe in God. I'm going to pick up the weight that he's called me to carry. I'm going to sow the seed. I'm going to look for good ground. I'm going to learn what good ground looks like, and I'm going to keep sowing seed. And then I'm going to lead everywhere I go. I'm going to serve other people. I'm going to look at the room, and I'm going to say what's required of me. And if you'll do these things, you will continue to mature, and you'll become everything that God created you to be. You will become a man that is a blessing to the kingdom and an asset to the kingdom instead of a liability.